Hi everyone, it's Eden, and today I'm going to share with you my 10 tips on how to read a book in just one day. Now, before we start, I do want to say that in my opinion, reading should be a pleasurable activity, whether it's for gaining knowledge or finding relaxation or inspiration, and the focus shouldn't be solely on finishing a book quickly. However, reading fast can be useful in some situations, and sometimes you do need to read a book in a day. So if you're here, I assume you have a reason for that, and I hope these tips will be useful for you. You've probably heard the saying, if you fail to prepare, you're preparing to fail. Fun fact about this quote, it's usually attributed to Benjamin Franklin. However, according to Quote Investigator, there is no indication of that, and the first instance of this quote was written actually by Reverend H.K. Williams in 1919. By now, the importance of planning is overused and is treated as a cliche, but it became a cliche for a good reason. Don't underestimate planning and preparing. Generally speaking, at this stage, I ensure I set aside dedicated reading time in an environment that is free from distractions. Here, I also want to remind you that it might seem like we don't have enough time to squeeze in some reading, but our days are filled with pockets of time that can be utilized for reading. So I, for example, carry a book with me everywhere, and whenever I have a moment, I'm ready to dive in. I'm going to divide this tip into 4 sections. The first one is evaluation, the second is make it interesting, the third is have a goal, and the fourth, set your reading environment. What I mean by evaluation is to take the time to assess your reading task. See how many pages you have to read, how long it takes you to read a page, and then calculate how much time you actually need. According to Forbes, the average person reads 300 words per minute. And if you want to test your reading speed and find out where you stand, you can use the link down below and test yourself. Then you need to plan out your day and make it as specific as you can to eliminate any choices that might lead you to procrastinate, because it's a known fact by now that as the day goes by, we are more likely to suffer from decision fatigue and are prone to make poor choices. An example of this can be seen in a study that was made in Israel actually by Jonathan Levav and Shai Denzinger in 2010. And their research shows that Israeli parole boards granted parole to around 70% of prisoners who appeared before them early in the morning. And because of the mental exhaustion of deciding on each case, they granted parole to less than 10% of prisoners who appeared before them later in the day. John Tierney, who covers this research in an article for the New York Times, argues that the more decisions we make, the harder each decision becomes. And eventually, our body will look for shortcuts, which can be either reckless decisions or a decision not to act at all. One of the ways to avoid that is to eliminate choice as much as possible, and creating a specific timetable for your day will create a huge difference. Another point that I want to mention about the importance of creating a specific timetable, not only for reading, but for every task that you have, is Parkinson's law, which is the idea that any task that you have expands to fill the time that is available for its completion. You've probably felt that more than once in your lifetime, and that is yet another reason why time in yourself is very important, and you'll be able to complete much more than you think when you set a specific time for it. As someone who's been diagnosed with ADHD, I need my tasks to be urgent and interesting. Now, to make my tasks urgent, I use the specific planning I just talked about and set small deadlines for myself. But I also need to make it interesting. And you've probably noticed that when you're genuinely engaged and interested in what you're reading, your reading speed and comprehension naturally improve. There's a research that has been done with rats that one group of rats, we'll call them Group A, was attached to a running wheel and could choose whenever they wanted to exercise. Group B was attached to a running wheel as well, but they didn't have a choice of when to use it. So whenever Group A used the running wheel, Group B had to use the running wheel. And the results were that although they had the exact same amount of exercise, Group A had all the good symptoms and benefits from working out, and Group B had all the symptoms that are related to depression, stress, and anxiety. And that is because they didn't have a choice. So this can be applied here, and we need to understand that we in a way need to choose to read, or any other task that we need to do. So if we didn't, and we're assigned to read a book and we have to finish it in a day to complete a certain assignment, then we need to find ways to choose it. And we can do that by making it interesting, by engaging with it, and by being excited about it. One of the ways I make it more interesting for myself is by reading about the author and the synopsis of the book that I'm about to read. It's like watching a trailer before you watch the movie. Sometimes I'll even read some reviews as well to see if I agree or disagree while I read, but basically I try to engage with what I'm reading and get into this zone with reading. Since we're talking about books, I also want to mention the Sawyer effect. We've all at least heard of Tom Sawyer, the character from Mark Twain's The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. And there is a scene in the book where Tom has to paint a fence. And instead of approaching it as a chore, he presented it as an amazing game to his friends. So much so that all of them wanted to join in and paint the fence for him. So the Sawyer effect is basically when you turn work into play, your motivation soars. So find ways to make reading interesting for you. And if you have more tricks, please share it with all of us in the comments. The third part of this tip, we're still in the preparation stage, is to set goals. Setting goals adds purpose to your reading, which is another way to make it engaging and interesting. As a teacher, whenever a student found it hard to manage their time correctly in a reading comprehension exam, I advised them to first read the questions and then go back to the text and look for the answers, and not the other way around, because it saves so much time and makes this process much more interesting. So when you read, consider why you're reading this book. Is it for entertainment or to understand the author's perspective about a certain topic? Whatever it is, just have this question in your mind when you read. If you're reading for an assignment, for example, define what specific information you're after. Like what is the main point of the book, or what is the author's approach to the certain topic you're looking into. And while reading, your brain will scan the book for answers. And even if it's just reading for pleasure, you can still set goals. For example, if you read a fantasy book, you can compare and analyze similarities with other fantasy worlds you've read about, or read some reviews and see if you agree with them or not, or any other purpose you can think of, because this will keep your brain focused while looking for answers throughout the book, and will turn reading into a sort of game to hunt down the information. The last part of this tip is to set your reading environment. Creating a comfortable and distraction-free reading environment is crucial. Arrange everything you need in advance so you're not tempted to interrupt your reading. Maybe light a candle and make the space cozy so you'll be excited to spend some time there. Remove any potential distractions. Keep your phone out of the room, close the door, and let those around you know you're in reading mode. Now, before we move on to the next tip, I want to say that if you can, start easy. If you're starting this journey not for a particular reason, for school or work, then allow yourself to start easy. Find a book that really interests you, something that is not too long and not too complicated, that will set you up for success in implementing these habits. Moving on to tip number 2, which is to break your reading into manageable sections. Set the timer for each one and track your progress. I'm a fan of the Pomodoro technique, which involves focused intervals of around 25 minutes followed by a short break. Personally, I found that 25 minutes, it's too short for me to have a break, so I listen to an ASMR room that is an hour long, and whenever it's over, I know it's time for a short break. Having a break is so important, and researchers from the University of Illinois have found that this method boosts productivity by maintaining concentration and preventing mental fatigue. So set a timer, immerse yourself in the book, and track your progress. Because tracking your progress and crossing out each section after finishing it, it's just a little success that can add a bit of dopamine to your system and lead to more motivation. As Jeff Hayden says in his book, The Motivation Myth, success leads to motivation, leads to success, leads to motivation. So we need to create these little successes to keep this motivation alive. The third tip is to use the pointer method. When we eventually start reading, an effective and very popular speed reading technique is the pointer method. The school teacher Evelyn Wood was the one to pioneer this technique of speed reading back then in the 50s, and it's such a great technique that it's still very popular today. With this technique, all you need to do is use your finger, a pen, or even a piece of paper to point and track the words on the page. This helps to maintain focus, and by pointing, your eyes know where to look. This also was found helpful, especially for those of us with ADHD or mild dyslexia, because it prevents the eyes from moving in another direction. The next tip is the tracker and pacer method, which is a variant of the pointer method. But this method involves underlining each line you read or tracking each line you read at a similar pace. And it prevents you from losing your place on the page while maintaining a faster reading pace, since you're not spending too much time on each line and your eyes are following the pointer and not the other way around. To explain this tip of expanding your vision, I'm going to do a short experiment first. Did you see this picture? What did you see? Did you see a drawing of a rabbit? I'm sure you did. And this is because our eyes can serve us way more than we think. And even in a split second, they send a lot of information to our brain. Now, in regards to reading, our peripheral vision can actually take in more words than we think. So instead of fixating on individual words, try to encompass whole sentences at a glance. Our wider field of view allows us to read about 5 words at once. So in order to do that, you need to point and look at the center of the line and use your peripheral vision to read the rest of it. If you wish only to skim the page, you can also do that in record time by using this method. Now, if we're talking about skimming, another great way to do that is getting more information by looking at the cover, scanning headings and subheadings, skimming through paragraphs by focusing on the first and last sentences for main ideas, etc. And a very interesting point on skimming a text, there's a study that actually revealed that skilled skimmers retain more information than passive readers. And it relates to the point I talked about earlier, that when you have a purpose, you're more likely to engage with the text and understand it better. And when we skim a text, it's usually because we have a specific information that we're looking for. The next tip is to minimize sub-vocalization. Some people, when they read aloud in their mind, and this is called sub-vocalization. And it takes so much time and it's unnecessary. So try to be aware of that and limit it as much as you can, and it will become easier with practice. What helps me is to listen to some background noise while I read, and that is one of the reasons why I listen to an ASMR room when I read. The next tip is to practice active reading. Now, this tip may sound to some of you as one that actually takes more time and doesn't save time. But one of the main problems that occur when we read for a few good hours is that we lose focus. And then we spend so much time rereading and rereading the same lines because the information is not getting through. So to maintain the focus for a long while, we need to stimulate our brains, and that is what active reading is for. It might take a few more seconds, but as a whole, it can save you a lot of time and the information is retained much better. Now, don't take just my word for it. A study published in the Journal of Educational Psychology found that active reading significantly enhances comprehension and memory retention. What I mean by active reading is to be engaged with the text again as much as you can. Highlight key quotes and passages, write down new words, notes, questions, additional information you want to explore, and so on. The next tip is to embrace accountability. Now, do you know this feeling when the house is a bit of a mess and you know your friend is coming over and suddenly you have lots of motivations to organize everything? Similarly, if you need to read, find ways to keep yourself accountable. Share your reading goals on social media, share it with friends, or even schedule joint reading sessions. Whatever it is that works for you, just remember that external accountability can drive and motivate you and help you stay on track. The next tip is to get motivated by others. I'm a big believer that we are what we consume, and I think that a big part of being able to stay on track, complete a task, change a habit, or improve your skills all can be achieved by consuming the right content on a daily basis. Each day, find a TED Talk that talks about the benefits of reading, watch a video like this one about reading tips or reading motivation, or listen to book review podcasts, or read posts about books or the topics that you're into. Find a book club to join, or maybe open one yourself. Go read in a library, and basically just make sure that every day you're surrounding yourself with content about reading, you're around people who read, so you'll keep a high level of motivation. Last but not least, don't forget that you can always utilize the power of audiobooks. They're perfect for multitasking while you're enjoying your book. There are plenty of free audiobooks on YouTube, and you can also subscribe to Audible, where you get a free book every month and an access to more books and magazines. Now, in case you were worried that it's not the same as reading, don't worry, because research conducted at the University of California, Berkeley suggests that listening to audiobooks activates similar brain regions as reading, and it enhances comprehension and vocabulary as well. So no worries, you can listen to an audiobook carefree. You can pair this with other daily chores or commute and finish a book while you do other things. And these are my 10 tips for you today. I just want you to remember that this is a skill and you might not see results right away, and the process to get there can be sometimes frustrating. But like any other skill, it can be improved. And when you do things over and over again, there is no other outcome than to get better at them. A good benefit that can come up with practicing this is not only the fact that you're going to read a lot and have more information about many things, you're going to improve your writing and your vocabulary, but you're also going to improve your logical thinking. As your brain gets used to receiving and organizing so much information so quickly, your thinking process will also become faster. The brain is, after all, a muscle, and the process of speed reading acts as an exercise. And just like the rest of our muscles, our brain needs exercise to grow stronger too. So keep that in mind and choose to read as much as you can. And if you choose to read a book in a day, choose it wholeheartedly and enjoy the process. Let me know in the comments which one of the tips you are going to start implementing, and if you want to share your tips for all of us to benefit from, that would be highly appreciated as well. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. Enjoy whatever you're reading right now, and I'll see you next time. Bye!